Hello and welcome to the Rise Up with Orion podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. This is when our podcast goes global. I am so excited to welcome our expert all the way from the UK. This is Dee Murray. She's a retired advanced psychotherapist, human behaviorist, and founder of the world's fastest growing resource in menopausal women. Dee recognized several years ago, whilst experiencing her own perimenopause, that this complex subject is not one that is often talked about. So leave it to Orion to bring it to our podcast to bring it up. Menopause forms a huge part of women's biology, as it often affects more than half of a woman's life. Dee, I'm going to say a couple of your quotes, and I'm sure you're probably going to circle back to these, but the psychology of menopause is fundamentally the bedrock of wellness. Mental health is always at the forefront of everything that we do. Dee has also mentioned that menopause is about hormones, not aging. So I'm so excited to talk to Dee today. This subject comes out a lot with our health coaches. Our health coaches screamed from the rooftops that we need to talk menopause. And it resonates with me. I'm throwing my age out there. I'm nearing this time. So Dee, thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UK to talk about this amazing subject. I think you're currently muted, but welcome to the podcast.
I'm not often muted. You speak to my team.
Yes.
I find it difficult to keep it quiet.
Yes, absolutely.
It's lovely to see you, Tora, and thank you so much for inviting me to talk about my favorite subject that I talk about every single day of my life.
Yes, thank you so much, Dee. So tell me a little bit more about kind of your journey with menopause and how you have started the Menopause Experts, which is how I circled back to finding you.
Well, interestingly, I mean, I'm still perimenopausal, and I'm going to talk to you about what perimenopausal means in the menopause journey. I'm just coming to the end of it. I've been perimenopausal for 10 years. So for 10 years, I've been studying menopause now. And in the field of business, I mean, this is becoming an industry actually within women's health, very, very fast moving, certainly for the last 5 years. And I suppose probably what started it for me was the onset of some symptoms that at the time I didn't entirely recognize as perimenopause, which a lot of women go through. Initially, you can have symptoms like heart palpitations, for example. Heart palpitations, which come along hand in hand with anxiety. Anxiety is not something that I ever really suffer from. Obviously, my training has allowed me to manage my own anxiety. And yet when I was about 43, I suddenly started getting heart palpitations, and they were going on for a considerable length of time. And I do remember actually this went on for 2 or 3 weeks, and I was carrying a little bit of excess weight at the time. I remember feeling quite heavy, and all my thoughts thinking about my heart health. And I was very concerned that something was going on with my heart. And I went to see my doctor. Well, I went to see several doctors actually. I'm sure we'll talk about this. Certainly in the UK, there is a lack of knowledge amongst our GPs, our doctors. Now, I don't blame them. It's not their fault. It's just that menopause as a subject was not really part of their training. When our GPs were training in the UK, menopause as a subject was an opt-in or opt-out subject. And I think this probably happens in the US as well. And so generally our doctors that we're seeing may have trained 10, 20, sometimes 30 years ago. And menopause was definitely not on the agenda, really wasn't spoken about. And there was a lack of interest in it. So when I went to see my GP, as I say, one of a few actually, when I was having my heart palpitations, hormones were never mentioned. Menopause never mentioned, because I was 43, but I had an inkling that it was something to do with hormones, because I couldn't work out why I was feeling so anxious and why I was getting these heart palpitations. So I insisted on having an ECG so that I could check for myself that my heart was okay, and it was. I asked to see one of the doctors who specialised in heart health. Had no bedside manner. I do remember that.
Oh, no.
And he said, "Oh, your heart is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with you." And I said, "But there is something. I don't feel right. There is something wrong." And he said, "Well, you're having an anxiety attack." So I said, "What do you mean?" I mean, it was so strange for me, having been in private practice for nearly 2 decades, to hear somebody tell me I was having an anxiety attack. And I didn't believe it. But I remember leaving the surgery and then going and sitting in my car and thinking about what he'd said and thinking about my symptoms. And it suddenly dawned on me that that's exactly what it was. It was anxiety that I was feeling. But I still didn't know at that time that it was my hormones. And so I had to piece it all together. Even though I had treated women for many, many years going through menopause, but nobody really understands what perimenopause is. And that's one of the areas that I really love talking about, because that comes way before our periods stop. And it's the most symptomatic phase. It is the most symptomatic phase. So I think there is this misunderstanding by those who don't know yet, that menopause happens actually whilst we're still having our periods, our menstrual cycle. So that can continue for 10 years or more. I mean, I'm one of those people. It's lasted 10 years, and I say I'm just coming to the end of it now. And it can't come soon enough. But there are all sorts of symptoms that happen during that time, and your hormones are fluctuating all over the place. So I could see that there was this huge void in proper information, all in one place. That was evidence-based. But also, I come from the world of the mind, and not everything is evidence-based. I very much work on the principle: if it makes you feel good, keep doing it. If it makes you feel terrible, don't do it. And so we developed a program and a licensing program for women and men. Men have joined us in the last 12 months, which is just brilliant. They're wanting to support women in their lives or in their practice. We've got personal trainers and life coaches. And so once they've got the knowledge, it means that they can help themselves and then help other people. And that's pretty much what Menopause Experts Group, affectionately known as MEG, it's what we do day in, day out. And we're very grateful to have representatives now in more than 22 countries around the world, and in some countries that you wouldn't think we're even talking about menopause. So that's really wonderful. So that's really how that journey started with the business. But it's more than a business. It is a social enterprise. We teach people to help themselves and then help others. That's our culture. And some of the things that people still don't know, even though in the UK menopause is headline news, we see it on TV now, celebrities are coming forward and talking about it and opening up about the subject, there are still so many myths and taboos surrounding this subject. It's crazy. We've got a long way to go yet.
Yes.
I always say, if menopause was a human being in time, it's only just getting up from a crawling state. It's nowhere near walking yet. So we've still got a long way to go, and there's a huge amount of research, thankfully, that's taking place now. A lot of it in your country, actually, not just the UK. And things are really changing. It's a wonderful time to be a woman, I think.
Yes, and I love that we're talking about this as well. Like in the UK, I remember very vividly during the Super Bowl, American football, there was a menopause commercial at the very beginning of the Super Bowl. And my eyes just got really big, because I was like, finally, within an event like this where there's millions of people that are tuning in, the topic came up. So I was like, this is so fantastic that finally we're starting to talk about it. And I know women talk about, silently suffering. So within the workplace where our corporate wellness company comes into effect, we're starting to talk about it. And that's fantastic. So I love the movement that Menopause Experts is forming. And Dee, I want to jump in a little bit further into perimenopause, because I think a lot of people think, okay, menopause, it's hot flashes, it's night sweats, it's going to be really obvious, and it's just going to happen. So back us up on that, because that's not just all it is, and it's not just going to happen one night.
No, it's something that that creeps up on you actually, and as you mentioned, I talk about it not being age related. In the big scheme of things, it's actually not age related. It is completely dominated by our hormones, and we speak to women that are in their 20s and 30s that are going through menopause. Women that have perhaps gone through breast cancer treatment, so they may have had some other diseases that they've had treatments for that might have then thrown them into menopause. They may have had a full hysterectomy if they've had their ovaries removed, if they've had their ovaries and their womb removed, straight into menopause. And so that they're going to experience symptoms, and most women experience some symptoms, but not all women experience debilitating symptoms. But about 1 in 20 will. It's there's quite a few women that will experience horrible, embarrassing, frustrating, painful symptoms. And so some of the symptoms that are easily identifiable, I'll run through a few of those that we all kind of think are associated with menopause. And then perhaps I'll throw a few of the ones that you may not know exist. Because if you Google the symptoms of menopause, you'll probably come up with about 34 in a list. And I can tell you there are a lot more. So 34 is just sort of textbook. And, we are not textbooks, we are human beings. And so there are a lot associated. So with perimenopause, generally speaking, brain fog, that fogginess, forgetfulness, wondering why you've walked into a room, losing your car keys. I mean, I can't remember how many times, there you are, forgetfulness, can't remember how many times I lost my car keys, and sometimes even my car.
Yes.
So, those sorts of things, which were really alien to me, brain fog, not knowing why I walked into a room, forgetting people's names, all of those sorts of things. And that can be quite intense and severe for some women, so much so that a misdiagnosis of early onset dementia could be talked about. Okay. So, and this is why awareness is so key, because there are ways to manage your own brain fog, and the hormones are changing in your brain. Okay, so our hormones are chemical messengers from our brain, and so it's going to be out of balance because it's going from, your body is going from a state of reproduction into post-reproduction. So we're actually moving into a different physical state. So it's going to throw you a little bit out of context. But not only that, I think in Western society, because our lifestyle is culturally very different, we are often in very high stressed situations, particularly at work. Women going through menopause, if you are of a certain age, 40s and 50s, it may well be that you've still got children at home. You're part of this sandwich generation, as we call it. So you have children at home and you're looking after elderly relatives. I mean, I kind of fit into that. My youngest is 20, but my eldest is 92 and she lives with me. Okay, so that's my mother with Alzheimer's. And I'm not rare. I mean, there are lots of us being carers, running full-time jobs, looking after our homes and all of that. So our life is really very full and very stressful. So you add that to the shift in hormones, plus our diets, and it's something that we can talk about as well, because diet is so crucially important when your hormones are changing. It all kind of adds and fuels these negative symptoms: the brain fog, the forgetfulness, the hot flushes we call them in the UK. You call them hot flashes. Um, Night sweats. I mean, they say night sweats, but sweats can happen during the day. It's not just at night. Your vision can change quite dramatically. You know, mine did inside of 2 years. I actually went from long-sighted to short-sighted, and needed a change in my prescription twice. So there are areas that estrogen, and estrogen is the dominant hormone here that is depleting. Would you believe, and I might jump around a little bit here, but I'm just trying to sort of fit in all the things that might be exciting for people to know about. There is still a belief that women actually produce eggs. We don't. We're not chickens. We have all the eggs that we're ever going to have when we're born. And so as a female baby, we have inside us about 2 or 3 million, I don't think anybody stopped to count them, but 2 to 3 million egg cells. And they are with us when we're born. So however many eggs we've got, we have them when we're born. And they start to deplete as we age. And as we move into puberty and we start our menstrual cycle, our eggs start to deplete. And actually, by the time we get to adulthood and we start thinking about having children, we've probably only got about 3 or 4% of those millions of egg cells left. 3 or 4%, which
Wow.
is why baby's a little miracle. Yeah. So that gives you an idea, doesn't it, of then going through the next 10, 20 years of our egg cells depleting and our menstrual cycle, which back to back is about 7 years for most of us. We actually bleed and have a period for about 7 years of our lives in total. Then you can see that our body is changing. Why? Because we're not really supposed to keep reproducing into our older years. And you don't need to go back in time too far. Just a couple of 100 years ago, we were only living until our mid-50s. And so that gives you more of a nature's view on why menopause happens. It's actually to protect us and to protect babies, because Mother Nature thinks you're not going to be wanting babies in your 50s. You're probably not going to live long enough to nurture that child and take it into maturity. So nature's very clever. Our bodies are very, very clever, but we've evolved over the last couple of 100 years. We are evolving. We're living much longer. 1 in 7 of us going to live until we're 100 years old. And so it's even more important now that we look at what happens during menopause, leading up to menopause, and after. What happens once our periods stop and we move into what's known as post-menopause. It leads you into a false sense of security, that word post. That's almost telling you it's over. It's
right.
Not.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's so true. Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's coming to mind for me is, there's so many, different symptoms that are out there, and, not everyone is going to see it the same way. So I love what you started out talking about today is, to ask those questions and to have those conversations, which is why we're, starting where we are today. But again, you were questioning your doctors. And I think this is so amazing, is to, question and to ask the questions and have an open dialogue so we all can survive this with grace.
I think we all know our bodies better than anybody else. So when you're out of kilter, you can feel when there's a change coming. And I think if you're prepared for perimenopause and you're prepared for those symptoms, the anxiety will be much less, because you're not going to be wondering whether you're dying or you've got something incurable or horrible that's going on. You're much more likely to take it in your stride and think, right, okay, maybe my periods are now starting to become irregular, because that's one of the first symptoms as well. Periods can become irregular, they can become heavier, they can become lighter, they don't always come on time, and there can be long gaps in between, and then you start having a bleed again. So there's a lot that happens within your cycle that changes, not just your temperature, which is regulated by the brain. So the brain is starting to balance out those hormones. And so, your temperature regulator, which is in the brain, is impacted upon. And that's why we experience hot flashes. But they get exacerbated if you're feeling anxiety as well. And of course, for some women, if you're having a hot flash at work and you think everybody else can see you, because as you're boiling, as you're boiling up, you tend to feel very self-conscious, and you think that everybody else can see you getting hotter and hotter, or sweatier and sweatier, and that produces even more anxiety, and then you get hotter.
Yes.
It's self-perpetuating, isn't it? So managing anxiety during perimenopause and menopause is key. Absolutely. Managing your mindset towards it, not seeing it as something to dread. It's just another stage that your incredible body is going through, just like it did at puberty. I mean, this is almost puberty in reverse. But you managed to survive puberty. Mine was hellish. I wouldn't want to go back there. Menopause is much better than puberty, I've got to tell you. And I think if you can go into this transition with the right mindset and the right information, because that's key. Education is everything. Knowledge is the power here. Then you can have a really, really good menopause, and it can be very, very empowering. I mean, I don't know about you, Tara, but I think you get to a point in your life where you stop worrying so much about things that perhaps kept you awake at night, when you were younger. You don't worry about those things as you get older. You stop sweating the small stuff. You know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, this is a really, really good time to look at yourself and start to do the things that you want to do in your life. Because as women, we're predisposed to looking after everybody else. And there comes a point in your life when actually we need to start putting ourselves first. And this is the time in our life when we really should be putting ourselves first. And that's very exciting and can be very liberating.
Yeah, Dee, I love that you're going the mental health route, and mental emotional health, really. I think that's an amazing place to start, because I think a lot of the times when we're talking about, menopause, we're trying to figure out how to stop it. We're trying to figure out how to stop the night sweats, the hot flashes. So kind of, what's within our control. And you can't control that. So I think that's an amazing place to start. So Dee, I would love to know more of your, symptom management, how best to deal with, these things that are coming our way.
Well, the first thing is, as I say, it's about mindset, and having that knowledge. If you've got that, then when you're going through symptoms, and symptoms will come and go, they'll be quite erratic. Because, as I say, your body is trying to do what it naturally wants to do, but we do block it. We block it with a poor diet, too much stress, maybe carrying too much weight, consuming too much sugar, alcohol, caffeine. Those three, they're quite evil. Those three. Mm-hmm. When you're going through menopause, sugar, caffeine, alcohol, and of course, there's a lot of sugar in alcohol, which people forget about. And alcohol and the menopause transition, they don't really mix. Caffeine is the same. Caffeine, if you're a coffee lover, which I am, I love coffee, but I haven't had caffeine in my diet for decades. And what I have recognized is that women going through hot flushes, or hot flashes as you call them, and this overwhelming sensation of heat is quite often followed after they've had some caffeine. And caffeine is hidden in a lot of drinks. Yes. Diet sodas, things like that. We've got to start reading the labels. We really have got to start reading the labels. There are a lot of intolerances actually that start appearing when you're going through this transition too. It may well be that you suddenly start noticing that you're bloating. Bloating is really, really common. And sometimes that is because our body's suddenly starting to react to wheat. And I know a lot of women that are reacting badly to wheat that hadn't before. And it's not necessarily the gluten. A lot of people then go on to gluten-free diets. It's not necessarily the gluten, it's the hybridized wheat. It's not a natural wheat that we eat, that we've been eating for decades. It's not natural, it's been messed about with. So wherever you can, start to look at the food that you're actually consuming and go back to nature, Mother Nature, really. You know, look for old-fashioned grains like einkorn. That's a wheat, but it's non-hybridized, and actually it won't give you that bloaty sensation if you're making bread with that. It won't get so bloated. It's just recognizing these things. You know, how much sugar is in your diet, how much salt is in your diet, and we've had all these mixed messages all our lives about sugar and salt. You know, too much salt and not enough salt, and too much sugar. Of course, we know white sugar is really, really terrible for us, but you know, we still can't get enough of it. But we do need to be really careful about the hidden sugars. Even in, do you know, there are hidden sugars actually in frozen vegetables? Would you believe it? Read the labels. You know, people just don't realize where this sugar is hidden. So you may not take sugar in your coffee, but it might be actually in your vegetables. I mean, it's just crazy. So eat fresh, eat organic if you can. I always say spend a bit more on good quality produce and eat less. That's a good rule of thumb. You know, we're in the West, we eat far too much. We eat more than we need. And so, you know, don't consume so much. Think of things as a luxury. Buy things that are better quality, that are local, that are organic. You know where they've been sourced, and try and integrate some vegetables, some color. Eat the rainbow, as we say. You know, add those colorful vegetables on your plate. Fill your plate with color, not just meat. You know, meat is particularly great for us. Chicken and fish, okay, you can do that. But try and steer clear of the other meats because of farming. You know, mass farming. We all know that animals that we consume, they enter the food chain with other hormones. So they've been injected with growth hormones and all sorts of things. So when we're going through hormonal change, the last thing we want to do is start consuming anything with strange things in it, because that's going to send us a little bit off balance. So food is a really big thing. But for me, focus on your psychology first, because then you'll start to feel better. Then you can start introducing little changes to your diet. And sometimes the smallest changes have the biggest impact. There are plant estrogens, because it is estrogen that we're trying to get to grips with the lack of estrogen that we have. And estrogen is a very, very powerful hormone to us. It's responsible for a lot of our bodily functions. It's responsible for our skin, our hair, our eyes, our bones, bone health, heart health, our major organs. We have estrogen receptors all over our body, everywhere on our body. And these estrogen receptors, you know, our bodies thrive with estrogen. And so when the estrogen is depleting, it's now having to adjust to not having so much estrogen. There's a little bit that's produced from our kidneys, our adrenal glands, but not enough. And so some women may choose to have hormone therapy. I know that you're familiar with that term in the States, and HRT, as we call it in the UK, is big news all the time. It's big headline news. Should we, shouldn't we? You know, celebrities are coming forward and saying HRT is this miracle. You know, I could barely get out of bed and now I'm bouncing. And that's not the case for everybody. It's not the case for everybody. It is actually a personal choice, and I think that every woman should never be shamed into taking it, nor shamed for not taking it. We're all individual. If you've got the relevant know-how, the relevant information, then you can make that choice and the decision, how to treat your symptoms, of which, as I say, some women have symptoms that are really quite unbearable. But for the rest of us who don't, we can manage ours pretty well with diet, lifestyle, exercise, well-being, mindset, reducing your stress, and things can change, and you can manage it really well. I know I'm
Yes.
rambling on,
No, I love, I mean, you you answered a whole bunch of the questions that, obviously I have written down as our conversation prompt today. So I'm so excited about that it's an individual choice in terms of, HRT or hormone replacement therapy. So again, goes back to what you said at the very beginning, to open up this conversation for yourself with your doctors. I think this is so, so great to always keep that in mind. And a couple other questions are coming through in terms of kind of treating hot flashes, if there's different triggers for them, and what are the options for treating them if you are prone to blood clots and you can't take hormones. If you feel them coming on, what can we do?
Well, firstly, I mean, the research is showing now that although there is still a risk associated with HRT, you can't say that there isn't. It is synthetic. It is produced, so anything that's chemically produced is going to have an impact on us. Even that is body identical, which basically enters the body the same as our own hormone. It's still going in via an artificial process. So there's still going to be a relative risk there. But the risks have certainly declined. In the old days of HRT, they did find a link between HRT and breast cancer. They still talk about the link, but it is much less. I think the focus has to be on our health, our overall health, because if you drink too much, if you're overweight, there are many other, if you smoke, there are many other factors that could actually bring on cancers. Okay, so I think that looking at ourselves in a very holistic way, rather than looking at ourselves in this very medicinal way, which is very one-dimensional, I always think that, this isn't a magic bullet at all. It can help a lot of women, but not every woman wants to take it. Not every woman can take it. The transdermal approach, which goes via the skin, has much less risk associated with it. So that might be patches, it might be a pump gel. You could use vaginal pessaries, for example, or vaginal creams, estrogen creams. Those sorts of things really work, and they have a minimal risk. And actually in the UK, doctors are talking to women who are, post breast cancer. So they've come out the other end of it, and they are still having these conversations about hormone therapy, even for those who have had cancer. So they are recognizing that some of them are much, 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 much safer, and it's down to risk versus benefit. That's what we must look at all the time, is risk versus benefit. So for me, I'm not pro HRT, as I call it, HT, you call it, I think. I'm not anti. What I am pro is knowledge and information, and then we can make the decisions for ourselves. And understanding our own biology is incredibly important. We study ourselves when we're having children. We kind of read everything about the pregnancy, and we look at pictures about the development of the fetus and all of those things. We need to start doing that about menopause, because it's much longer than puberty. It's much longer than pregnancy. It is more than half of our lives quite often. And especially when you think that a lot of us are going to reach our 100th birthday, we do need to be considering our heart health, our bone health. Bones really, really rely on estrogen. So we need to make sure that we're doing things like not necessarily going to the gym, because that's not for everybody, but there are things that you can do, weight bearing exercises, take up yoga. If I could go back 20 years I would have been doing yoga for 20 years. I would have definitely started yoga in my 30s, probably 30. I would have started taking it much more seriously. So we're trying to educate women that are much younger as well, because prevention is better than trying to fix it when you're in it. So keeping our bodies supple and looking at our wellness is really, really crucial. It really is. And that manages your symptoms. There are a lot of symptoms that we have that can be easily managed if we catch them in time. I mean, I've got terrible knees. My knees are probably going to need to be replaced. I'm managing them at the moment. I'm dropping a bit of weight, because your knees and your hips, you know, that they tend to be affected because they are where estrogen used to love, particularly your hips. So if you're getting painful joints, it's very hormonal, but it could also be a signal that you could be moving into osteo issues, you know, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis. So taking care of our joints is really, really crucial. And we lose a lot of our strength. You know, I'm not sure whether you've noticed, I certainly noticed a lot of my upper body strength, my hand strength. You know, I suddenly couldn't open jars anymore. I had to get my son to open jars. You know, things like that. And I used to be so strong. And then a lot of my strength just started to dissipate. And that is because of the drop in estrogen. So we need to sort of build that back up. But you don't have to go and pump iron, you know, you don't have to do those things. You just have to find what works for you. Otherwise, if something becomes too much like hard work, we'll talk ourselves out of it, and then we'll never make that change. So we've got to get the mindset right, and then all of the things will follow. And just finding the things that work for you is what matters, because we're all different.
Yes, and Dee, just to reiterate as well, as I love to circle back to, you know, eating healthy and eating from the ground up. We often talk about it when filling our plates with colors, because you're getting the vitamins and the supplements and the different things through our food versus an external, you know, source. We talked about this last month when we were talking about diabetes prevention. It isn't that much different when it comes to the nutrition and making sure that we're using, you know, this anaerobic activity to keep our bodies moving. We often talked about functional mobility, as well as opening those cans and reaching above our head and pushing ourselves up from a chair. Little things that we do hundreds of times over the course of the day, but we don't think about it as training and practice. And it is so much of a holistic practice to do all of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of research. I just want to throw this in, because this is food for thought. I mean, I love the brain. Okay, the brain is my thing. But there's a lot of research now coming out about vitamin D. Now, we've always known that vitamin D is something that we're pretty much deficient in. I mean, certainly in the UK we are. You know, between the months of October through till March, we barely see the sun. And so, you know, lots of us will take vitamin D supplementation, but many people don't. And they're showing links now between vitamin D as a deficiency and dementia. So the more vitamin D we get, the more preventative we're being, you know, further down the line. It's so important to us. I don't think we realize how important it is, because I think our generation as well, we've been told to stay out of the sun a lot. So, you know, there's a mixed message there. We've got to stay out of the sun because of skin cancer, but also that can mean that you stay out of the sun permanently, and then you're not absorbing any vitamin D. So just being out there for 15 or 20 minutes, you know, safely will give you that vitamin D that you need. And certainly, if you're not living in a sunny climate, then you need to be looking at vitamin D as a supplement, because it's quite difficult to get through food. So, you know, you really do need to be supplementing that vitamin D. And it's very interesting, the reports. If anybody wants to Google it, there are quite a few reports coming out now about the importance of it. And also B12, magnesium, zinc, these things are so important to us, and we do become very deficient. Magnesium can affect our mood. Okay, so mood swings. Talk about mood swings. So you know, you can be really happy one minute and then wanting to murder your family the next, and that is, you know, it can be really quite severe, this mood swing. And a lot of that is to do with the fluctuation in hormone that's going on in your body. But again, recognizing the triggers, because some of that can be triggered by food as well. You know, it really can. It can be triggered by alcohol. It can be triggered by caffeine, by sugar. So just recognizing what goes into our mouths is crucial, absolutely crucial. Say, read the labels of everything. Just get into a habit of doing that. And going out for a walk for 15-20 minutes in a bit of sunshine, a bit of daylight, then you know you're going to absorb your vitamin D. Somebody was asking about symptom management. You could probably get these in the US, I'm sure you can. But we tend to buy some big bags of mineral salts and throw those in your bath. If you have a salt bath with, you know, it's heavy on magnesium, it can be absorbed then through the skin, and that will really lift your mood. I do this very regularly, and I love a nighttime bath. It really helps me with my sleep and to relax. It's just part of my ritual. And you know, once a week I'll just throw some mineral salts in there, and it's really, really good for us. So there are lots of tips and tricks and techniques that you can use. It's not all doom and gloom. It really isn't. And being around upbeat people, that helps too. Not the most.
Yes, and you are one of them, Dee. I am so thrilled with everything that you gave us. I'm a sleep nerd myself as a certified sleep science coach. So you are speaking my language with the warm bath, the mineral salts, and attempting to get a good night's rest. I'm sure it all leads into this as well. You are speaking my language with that. It is so important.
Yeah, sleep disruption, of course, that's another big symptom. Sleep disruption, get those blue lights out of your bedroom. You know, just look at your environment. Really look at your environment. How do you sleep? Are you sleeping with somebody who snores? You know, and if you are, then either consider having using the spare room. If the kids have all left home now, you know, convert that spare room into something very luxurious for you to sleep in. Associate your bedroom with sleep and sex, not the ironing, okay, not the laundry. Get that out of your bedroom. Get the work things out of your bedroom. It's for relaxing or sexual pleasure. You know, just look at it as those two things. I know sexual pleasure, we haven't talked about this because that comes up in conversation a lot. We talk about bedroom activity and intimacy, sex, love, and intimacy. And that's one of my subjects that I really do. Maybe I can come back and talk about that because I do love talking about that. It's really super important. Yeah, super important. I've got lots of tips, tricks, and techniques for that too.
Well, that's where the excitement comes in. Dee, so can you mention one more time? I obviously introduced you with a little bit of this information, but if people want to contact you or they want to reach out for more information, where can they get hold of you and menopause experts?
Well, just go to menopauseexperts.com. That's where you'll find us. There is a section on the website called Ask Meg, and the company is called Menopause Experts Group, so we call her Meg. So there is an Ask Meg section, which is all free information, lots of great articles. And also we have a monthly magazine called Menopause Life, which is just brilliant. It's run by a colleague of mine who's actually, I mean, she's menopausal, as most of my colleagues are, hasten to add, even the men. And she runs the magazine. She's the editor of the magazine. We're looking to host this magazine in the US soon, probably this year. So that'll be great. And it really is about lifestyle. It just embraces everything that you know, the challenges, the highs, the lows. Provides so much information and real stories, real life stories from people who are living the experience and it's really very uplifting. So they can go on to the website and you just have a look in the shop, and you can download it. It's a digital magazine, and that's a bit of a tonic. It really is. Jane, who's the editor, she's a transplant survivor. So she had a very rare condition, and had a bone marrow transplant. And so, you know, she had the threat of loss of life. This was more than 10 years ago now. Boy, she lives her life now. She really, really does. And even though she's going through menopause and was put into it really quite early at 42, she just gets on with it. So, you know, she's testament to, it doesn't really matter what's thrown at us. There is a way through everything. You just need to believe it. You just need to believe it. And then life can be fantastic.
Yes, Dee, the conversation is just getting started. I think I'm glad that we're talking about it here on the Orion podcast. I'm so excited to have your knowledge, and I'm challenging everyone to keep the conversation going. I think the community that menopause experts and Meg is forming, but we also can form this conversation and this community among the Orion population as well. And with our, you know, girlfriends and families and husbands, keep the conversation going, and bring that conversation to your doctor as well, as something that I've learned from Dee this morning as well, this evening to Dee. So Dee, thank you so much to you for all of your knowledge, joining us all the way from the UK. I hope you enjoy your you know, mineral bath salt tonight, and I hope to talk to you very soon.
That's lovely to see you, Tara. Yes, I'll speak to you again very soon, I hope, on another topic. I mean, this is so broad, it's so wide. We don't have time in one webinar.
It is true. 45 minutes is very short. So just touching the surface, there's a lot more out there. And again, thank you so much, Dee, for joining us. And I welcome everyone to join us next month for our podcast, when we're actually going to be talking to a professional holistic chef who is an expert in cooking and eating for food allergies, which I think so many of us are also suffering with that. So join us next month. And Dee, thanks again.
You're welcome. Bye.